Welcome back everyone to Bridge the Divide, the channel where I examine irrational beliefs, the irrational behaviors that often follow, and how we, with education, rationality, and reason, can bridge the societal divides that they create. For anyone unfamiliar with the history of this channel, I actually created it way back in 2010. But it wouldn't be until 2019 when I would actually start working regularly as a content creator. And I began that journey with something that I was really comfortable with, and that was a film review. The subject in question being J.M. Truth's Superman fan film.
Things that make you go, ugh.
But my primary focus since then has been addressing the various claims and arguments made by theists across YouTube. However, as luck would have it, and after seeing my social media inundated with ads for it, I got the opportunity to combine what I started with what I currently do. And that is with a review and deconstruction of the recently released Christian anthology film, God's Not Here. Now, this review video is going to be a little bit different than the ones you're probably accustomed to elsewhere on YouTube. And that's because I can't actually use any clips from the film itself, and for two reasons. One, the film is only currently available via streaming platforms, so I wouldn't be able to obtain a personal copy without illegally pirating it. And two, nearly every second of the film has licensed music laid into it, so playing any clips would probably result in demonetization. And over the course of breaking this film down over the multiple times that I watched it, I've come to suspect that last reason was something that was done intentionally, despite all of the problems that it creates with the final cut. So without further ado, let's dive into all the gory details about the film, what the director was likely trying to accomplish, and explore why God's Not Dead ultimately ranks as just another Christian propaganda piece, or what is now industry speak for Kevin Sorbo's Filmography. God's Not Here is a 2023 Christian anthology film written, directed, and produced by Matthew Ciccella. Matthew is also the owner and CEO of Never Submit Entertainment, which co-produced the film with Zachary Richmond of Rich Colors Productions. The film was shot at various locations in Illinois and made extensive use of the First Presbyterian Church in Marengo, which, as far as churches go, has considerable production appeal given its age and its architecture. Interestingly, Ciccella also bills the film as the first ever faith-based anthology film. But, and like some dark harbinger of what's to come, it turns out that claim is incorrect, because that distinction actually belongs to a little 2021 film called Mission Stories, which is a faith-based anthology film inspired by stories of those serving missions for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's right, Matt. Those industrious Mormons with their impressive fantasy world building unfortunately beat you to it. Now, the title of Matthew's film takes direct inspiration from the God's Not Dead franchise, but instead of edgily adding the not like those films did, here they edgily cross it out and then present the narrative that their God is really here but only appears to not be here. And before you all get too excited, the answer is no. The logical entailments of that particular conundrum are never directly addressed. Jumping into the film, actress Ariana Alexis, who previously worked with Ciccella on his film Without Grace, pulls overtime in 4 different roles and 3 terribly distracting wigs as she plays the lead in the framing narrative and the 3 subsequent short films. She is supported by Jonathan Brunson, who portrays Pastor Darius Williams in a performance as absurdly energetic as it is emotively vacant, and Gary Metivier, or possibly Gary Medivere, I could never find which way it's pronounced, in 4 different wise old codger roles that invariably serve as the plot jeep for each story, driving the narrative of the other characters' personal epiphanies regarding forgiveness, faith, and God's logically contradictory, non-existent existence. So after a sweeping shot of the church that I mentioned earlier to kick the film off, the framing narrative opens with a very serene, early morning moment with a fully made-up Ariana in the role of Sarah, still in her jammies and starting her day off with a quick ritual at the idol of Keurig. But things escalate quickly when an unexpected morning visitor is revealed to be her estranged father Bob, played by Gary, who has shown up at her door carrying some apologetic white tulips and looking for forgiveness. It's then revealed that Bob is a recovering alcoholic who many years previously was involved in an accident that resulted in the death of Sarah's mother. And in what amounts to a very jarring actor choice, Ariana goes from 0 to over-the-top hysterical in about 2 seconds flat as she venomously disparages and dismisses her estranged father from her porch. This, as it turns out, would be the first of many problematic actor choices that occur throughout the entire film. And these slip-shifting choices continue throughout the following conversation between Sarah and her husband Dylan, played with a strange dismissive aloofness by Mark Edwards, another Chiquella regular. After recommending that they return to bed to try and relax and calm down, Sarah inexplicably dismisses her husband's concerns and suddenly declares out of nowhere that she needs to go to church, which for some reason comes as a complete surprise to Dylan. Unfortunately, we'll see multiple disjointed moments like this throughout the entire film, and that's because Matthew's script is intentionally constructed to push a very specific narrative. But there is a reason why Matthew's writing approach really only works for non-fiction projects like documentaries, where established events, facts, and evidence are used to compile the presented narrative. But in fiction, when compelling story elements and characterization are eschewed in favor of the director expressing specific ideas that are important to them, it results in dialogue that is churned out painfully stilted, which in turn reduces opportunities for character exploration, forces the actor into unnatural performance choices which only serves to dissociate the audience from the film, and makes natural pacing almost impossible, which is why the film interrupts its frenetic moments of activity with painfully dragging exposition. It's directorial choices like this that invariably work against the audience's suspension of disbelief, because instead of drawing the audience in by posing a philosophical question that they ultimately must answer themselves, or offering a compelling perspective on life that is ambiguous enough to elicit post-viewing contemplation or conversation, Chiquella chooses a bluntly didactic narrative style that pulls the attention towards himself instead of his characters and his story. So after Sarah arrives at the church, what follows in the film are 3 shorts that each have their own theme. Specifically, and in this order, loss, trauma, and grief. The first short, entitled God is Missing, centers on a mother named Amelia, played by Ariana, who is struggling to cope with the loss of her daughter, while being at odds with her husband Michael, proficiently portrayed by actor Jose Santiago in what is probably the most grounded performance in the film, over how to deal with this devastating tragedy. The two have an explosive argument, she storms out, and inexplicably makes her way to the nearby church. And after a fairly disjointed talk with Father Bishop, played by Gary, who gives her nothing but a vacuous appeal to mystery, interspersed with some psychedelic shots of Amelia's grief-stricken memories, the short ends with Amelia sitting in the street sobbing and thanking God after finding her daughter's teddy bear that she had thought her husband Michael had put in storage in the back of the car. The second short, An Encounter with God, follows ex-convict Trey, earnestly portrayed by Lester E. Hart, who, while trying to better himself, comes face to face with the traumatized father of the child who died in the accident that put him in prison. Looking for work, Trey enters a local diner run by Stella, played by Ariana, who begrudgingly hires him despite expressing the negative community optics of doing so. But what starts as a stereotypical Midwestern small-town diner scene quickly devolves into a PG Tarantino-esque hostage situation, when later in the evening, Wyatt, the father of the aforementioned dead child, played by Gary, storms into the diner, brandishes a gun, confronts and eventually shoots Trey, but seemingly in an act of divine intervention is completely missed by the shot. It's a sequence so emotionally over the top that you can't help but laugh, but no more so when local police officer Conway, stiffly portrayed by Terry King, who was in the diner the entire time, arbitrarily allows the perpetrator to walk free from multiple felony counts after the ex-con that he just attempted to murder forgives him. Oh, what a justice system exists in Chiquella's world.
What the hell is the world coming to?
And the third short, entitled Go With God, follows Ariana's wealthy but grieving widow, Dr. Nikki, who, while visiting the grave of her husband, encounters Charlie, an old man who has voluntarily taken up residence in the cemetery, who then bluntly gives her an alternative view of life. But in place of what could have been an interesting dialogue on materialism, naturalism, and doxastic involuntarism, Chiquella instead gives the audience a ham-handed diatribe on how true happiness cannot be achieved from anything in material reality, but only from that which is considered abstract and transcendent, and all you have to do is believe it in spite of all the evidence to the contrary. And it's all capped off with Nikki, who, by the way, was introduced as a staunch atheist, getting... Oh, hang on a sec. Matthew shot that scene so dark, let's fix that. There we go. Getting killed in a mugging gone wrong. and seemingly becomes a believer in her final moments as she lays dying in the street while her atheist friend panics and does nothing. The film then attempts to sum everything up in the closing of the framing narrative. With Darius' sermon over, Sarah, now happily rejuvenated and in the mood to forgive, hauls herself over to the home of her estranged father and his new wife Betty, only to find out from her, gasp, wait for it, Bob died earlier that morning, hours before he could have ever been at her house asking for forgiveness. Zoinks! Yes, Bob was a ghost the entire time. And Chikella even foreshadowed it way back at the beginning when Bob showed up with the white tulips, which apart from expressing apology, are also a popular funeral flower. But after this revelatory moment, the entire exchange between Betty and Sarah regarding her estranged father's lifelong guilt and embracing of Christianity, and Sarah's eventually letting go of her anger in this huge scene when she leaves, are so unnaturally overwrought that they just yank the audience clean out of the moment. As if in his attempt to capture the spirit and emotion of, say, Marley and Me, Chikella completely overshoots and lands squarely in the room.
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
Chikella's God's Not Here misses the mark on two fronts. From a technical aspect, while the film drops the ball in a number of categories, the worst of all is its audio. Throughout the entire film, character dialogue either echoes ridiculously in the space, or it's so soft at times that it's obnoxiously drowned out by the licensed alt-gospel themed music that plays throughout. Otherwise, the film is fairly basic in everything that it does, no worse or better than your average film student can deliver. Unfortunately, the lack of risk-taking and imagination, especially in the lighting and camera work, which is something that comes with experience, makes all the worst parts even more noticeable. The second front is the overall writing itself. The characters and dialogue choices written out to push Chikella's particular narrative are both intellectually dishonest and philosophically bankrupt. Atheists are strangely depicted as sullen, willful, obstinate, angry, or dismissive, with their lack of faith often suggested to be a result of a prior trauma, and they are all depicted with incredible dishonesty as actually being believers, with their apparent lack of faith being merely the result of some implied inability to reconcile reality without a god, or some personal dissatisfaction with their own lives. Chikella's script also attempts to validate its own position, that God is here despite apparently not being here, by committing various logical fallacies such as arguments from incredulity and ignorance and appeals to emotion and consequence. Chikella's film also seeks to undermine the real-world value of critically recognizing the difference between imagination and reality by dangerously presenting feelings and faith as being more valid than facts, and that just because a concept has a physiological or emotional utility, it then must follow that it exists in reality. Even Chikella's pastor Darius concludes his sermon by dropping Pascal's wager on the congregation. And because this church full of My Name is Earl extras suddenly erupts in standing ovation to this, it indicates that Chikella researched nothing about the finer details of his narrative choices and is just regurgitating things he's heard before. That's something that's exemplified by the fact that Chikella ends each one of the shorts with a selected quote from the Bible. His choice to use Daniel 9:9 after his first short betrays his lack of understanding of its psychologically abusive connotation, as the quote infantilizes human beings as being so inherently irrational, broken, and weak that in order to reconcile reality and achieve happiness and purpose in one's life necessitates an emotional appeal to the supernatural. His choice of Leviticus 19:18 after the second short is obvious cherry-picking from the atrocious list of Levitical laws, and his choice of John 3:15 after the final short ignores that it's just begging the question with a message that psychologically preys upon the natural human fear of death. Ultimately, a film can be made for any given reason, and I will always applaud a director for getting their project in the can, because that is an accomplishment worthy of praise. But if the intention is to make compelling and engaging material, then it behooves the filmmakers to do their homework and try to break new and interesting ground. Otherwise, the result will be nothing more than an obvious ego piece designed to pat the director on the back for believing what they already believe.
So we're spending $47 million so that somebody can feel better about a car that they've already bought?
And until that egocentric cycle is broken, God's Not Here and all of the films like it will never be anything more than the echo chamber produced propaganda pieces that they come off as. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. And be sure to leave a comment below. I love reading your responses, and those interactions help with the dreaded algorithm. Don't forget, April is Child Abuse Awareness Month. A link on how you can help these important efforts is down in the description. And if you love scary movies, be sure to check out me and my filmmaker friends over at the Week in Horror podcast, now in our 4th season. Everything you need to become a channel member here, get yourself some official Bridge the Divide gear, support the podcast, or even get your own official Darth, Dawkins, Squeak toy is in the description below. Once again, thank you all so much for your continued support, and as always, be safe, be excellent to each other, and together we can bridge the divide.